I am thrilled to announce that tonight's video has been graciously sponsored by Skillshare. This incredible platform offers a wealth of online classes taught by experts on almost everything. Now is the best time to brush up on an old skill or learn something new. With classes from kickboxing to craft, there's something for everyone. I personally have been improving my poi from Ben Drexler and highly recommend it if you want to learn flow arts. The first 1,000 of my subscribers to click the link in the description will get 30% off an annual premium membership, so you can explore your creativity. Even if you already have a free trial of Skillshare, you can still take advantage of this offer to get the full year of unlimited learning and creative exploration. So make the most of it. Link in the description. But for now, it's time to get comfortable and let the darkness take control. I come from a remote island called Rendova, located in the Solomon Islands, and have since moved overseas, hence access to the internet. Across from our island is another island called Tetepare. The story of Tetepare is really interesting, because it was abandoned completely by the inhabitants a few centuries ago. Just like the villagers fled the island to come to neighboring islands, such as my own, and here we are a few centuries later. Because of the lack of humans on the island, it is known for its biodiversity, and few researchers come every now and again to have a look. If you're looking for cool remote places to travel after the pandemic, I highly recommend it. The interesting part of Tetepare for me was, why did everyone just leave? If you were a villager back in the day, it would have been a great place to live. Volcanic soil to grow crops, an abundance of fresh water, animals that were easy to hunt. But the official story told is there was a great sick, and people were dropping like flies left and right. So the villagers fled to get away from the sick. However, the island is known for being so very big. Realistically, if you wanted to get away from others, it wouldn't have been too hard, because you could be self-sufficient on other parts of the island. The story told to me growing up is a bit different though. Back in those days, we loved to fight. A war canoe from my island, Rendova, arrived on Tetepare to fight. However, upon arrival, they were met with numerous unburied dead bodies. All the large canoes that belonged to the Tetepare people were gone. To leave so hastily and not even bury your dead was a really weird thing, because it was back in the days where they first thought that spirits had done this to these people. However, the people from Rendova decided to set up villages against their better judgment. In due time, they also fled because the spirits that had decimated the population of Tetepare apparently attacked the newly set up villages there. Ever since, the island has continued to remain uninhabited, except for a few of the eco-lodges that tourists come and visit now and again. Now in present day, we go to Tetepare to maybe have a picnic or go hunting. We are, however, extremely cautious, because it is believed the island is still extremely wild, and because of the lack of humans, spirits run amok on the island. I have some weird stories about going hunting there too, and I think it's time to tell you them. The island is said to be wild because no churches have been built on it yet. For this reason, it is alleged that spirits still roam free. Ever since I was small, we went hunting on Tetepare. They have an issue with wild boars destroying their natural habitat, so hunting is encouraged, and as a result of chasing boars around the island, I have a pretty good knowledge of knowing where things are. A few years ago when I was younger, while we were hunting, we decided to go visit our other relatives at the Eco Lodge. Recommend visiting if you want a unique experience. There was a researcher who wanted to have a look at unique flora and fauna, and since I was the only one who spoke English somewhat fluently, I volunteered to take him. We explored the island quite extensively. The thing is, we know that when we're hunting, we don't go deep into the rainforest, because you may not come out. Simply because of its density, but also because there have been stories of other things. Anyway, I was taking this researcher around and he had a navigational piece of equipment. He was using it to see where we were going. The day was coming to an end. and I wanted to return to the eco-lodge because I didn't want to be camping in the middle of the night without shelter. The way we normally do things is come back out of the rainforest towards the coast, and from there, walk to wherever we need to go, because we don't want to get lost in the rainforest. I knew where we were, and I knew the way to the coast, and told the researcher, let's get going this way. This is where things get weird. His device was saying the coast was the completely different direction from where I knew the direction to the coast was. Now, I've heard stories when people go hunting about losing their minds and going straight into the rainforest and never coming back out. At that point, I had to question my own brain, because what his device was saying was completely different to what I knew. But I knew in that moment that it may be his device playing up, and I didn't want to take the risk of disappearing into the rainforest because of it. I had walked this forest thousands of times, so decided to trust my gut. I told the researcher I thought his device was incorrect. He did not like the sound of that at all and tried to argue with me, saying that I was wrong. I knew something was wrong, and so I didn't want to spend my time arguing and wanted to get out of their area ASAP. So I basically told him, I'm going the way I know to get to the coast. You can follow your device if you want, but I'm not following you because you're wrong. We may die. Long story short, I followed the direction I knew, and lo and behold, we made it to the coast. Thing is, if we'd have followed his device, we would have ended up in the densest part of the island where people are known to have gone missing. When we made it back to the eco-lodge, he apologized and checked his device to see if it was broken. But lo and behold, turns out it was working perfectly again. This happened in March of 2011 near my house, in a small town about an hour north of Indianapolis, Indiana. I was in 8th grade at the time, and it was during my spring break. That year, instead of sunshine and warm weather for spring break, there was a snowstorm, probably around 8 inches or so of snow. My 2 friends, my 2 younger brothers and I decided to make the best of it, and just go play in the snow for the day. There was a woods near my house, not a huge woods, but big enough to hike around for a few hours, so we decided to do just that. About an hour into the hike, we stumbled on what looked like an old well, a stone circle, about 10 feet in diameter, and about 4 feet high off the ground, and partially filled in with foul-smelling, half-frozen water. We threw in a few rocks and stuck long tree branches into it to try and find out how deep it was. We tried with a branch that was at least 20 feet long, but we were never able to hit the bottom, so it was pretty deep down. Now, the well by itself wasn't really creepy or anything, but how old it looked, and the way it was just sticking out in the middle of the woods was a little unnerving. The part that really terrified us came about 20 minutes after discovering the well. We had decided that we were done messing around with the well, and had just started to continue on to the woods, when we all heard something that made us freeze dead in our tracks with fear. Echoing through the woods came a loud, shrieking laugh. It was a high-pitched, grating voice that was still very loud, despite seeming like it came from somewhere far away. We all just froze for a moment, trying to make sense of what we'd heard. The laugh came again, this time distinctly closer to us, but still not in our immediate vicinity. At that moment, none of us was saying a word. We bolted back the way we came, away from the sound in the direction of my house. We didn't stop running for what seemed like forever, and we eventually made it back to my house without any more incidents. None of us had a clue as to what we'd just heard, and none of us were ever brave enough to go back there and try to figure it out. I would love to hear any thoughts about what it could have been, paranormal or otherwise. This happened to me, my brother, and our friends. Not a my sister's uncle's best friend story. This is personal and 100% the truth. Make no assumptions. Here are the facts. You make up your own mind as to what happened. I grew up in a small mountain town in Utah, away from civilization up a canyon. If you walk out my back door and through a 200-yard field, you will come upon a river and a small wooded area. We always called these the river bottoms, for obvious reasons. Summer of 2004, just before I turned 16. Our house was the go-to party location, always clean parties, and lots of people would show up. And most nights we would end up having a bonfire in the backyard with guitars and just chilling and watching the fire and the stars. Well, one night, we started telling ghost stories. One of my close friends lived a mile down the road with his house, some distance away from the same river bottoms. Discussion turns from the fake ghost stories to real talk about weird things that have happened to us, and my friend quickly takes the attention. He tells 2 stories. The first was when he was younger, 10 or so. He wakes up in the middle of the night in the dead of winter and decides to go downstairs for a glass of water. His kitchen sink faces the river bottoms. While drinking, he looks up at the window and sees a man's face looking at him from outside. He drops the glass. It shatters on the floor, and his mum comes in to see what happened. They turn on the porch light and look outside, where there had been fresh snow, and there was no man or any footprints. Okay, must have been a reflection, sure. A few weeks later, he's outside playing in the snow just after dark, and his dog starts barking and growling towards the river bottoms. He looks out, can't see anything, but gets a weird feeling in his stomach and starts to go inside. He's about to go to the back door when he hears his dog behind him yelp. Then he comes running towards him. Again, turns around and can't see anything and runs inside. He finishes the story saying that he has always had this fear of the river bottoms and doesn't like going out there. Naturally, as a bunch of young men with something to prove, a few of my friends decide they are going to go out to explore. It's nearly a full moon and a clear night, so visibility is pretty good. I think 5 made this trip. They leave about 15 or so of us just chilling around the fire for 10 minutes. Definitely not long enough to really get to the bottoms and explore anything, and they come running back to the fire. A few of them say they saw something out there, which isn't too out of the ordinary. The fields between my backyard and the bottoms frequently have cows, and it's common to see deer, coyotes, as well as other wildlife in the area. We talk them down and resume the guitars. One of my older brother's friends is sitting with his back facing the bottoms and has been unusually quiet since he got back and keeps turning his head to look behind him. Standing at 6'5" and weighing 240 pounds plus, it was very out of character, and eventually, a second group decides to go out. This time we go inside and gather up flashlights, hockey sticks, baseball bats, whatever we can find just in case. This time we have a group of about 10, which includes myself, and we get about halfway to the river bottoms when I started to get a really dark feeling. I related to fear, but it was so much more, just like something wasn't right. The only time I've had fear like this was when I had a gun pointed at me a few years ago and had genuine fear of my life. Then we start to hear this faint whistle, almost like you would hear with the wind in a wooded area, but we weren't in the trees yet. Then we heard it again in a different direction, then directly behind us, much faster than a person could have moved without being heard or seen. We get freaked out and clump together. We hear the whistle again, and the 2 with flashlights both zero in on the spot to our left, and what we see just for a fraction of a second is a dark silhouette, maybe 3 to 4 feet high, and red reflection in the eyes. Then it darts away at insane speed and we lose it. Knowing that everyone saw this thing, we all make a mad dash for the house. Getting back to the fire, we decided we didn't want to stay there any longer. We put out the fire in typical youth fashion. All the boys stood in a circle and peeing on it until the coals were gone, and climbed in the cars and left. About an hour or so later, my brother and I get home, and as we're pulling into the driveway, we see the fire in a blaze again. Still feeling creeped out, We go to put it out with the hose, and all of the wood that we had in the stacks a few feet away had been thrown into the pit. Very weird. The next day, we're having Sunday dinner with my parents. Quick side story. My dad grew up in the 50s in a neighboring house where we currently live. They ask if we had fun last night, and my brother says, "Yeah, but I don't know if anyone will be coming back anymore." "Why is that? Do you guys see the bogeyman?" "Yeah, Dad, we saw the bogeyman," chuckled my brother sarcastically. "Really? I saw the bogeyman once. I was really little, probably 8 or 9. I remember I was really sick and had a fever. But I remember looking out my front door one night, around dusk, and seeing this dark shape next to our mailbox. Its head was just below the mailbox, and it was looking at me with glowing red eyes. It was at that point that my brother and I both looked at each other. Did you tell him what happened?" We both knew he had been telling the truth. A few weeks later, we again are having a bonfire at the house, when we notice that the river bottoms seem to be glowing a little ways away. We hop in the car and get almost to my friend's house when we see that the bottoms are on fire. We call 911 to report it. It is government land, and decide to go out and see it for ourselves while waiting for the fire department to arrive. It wasn't super out of control, and as we get there, we see that it's just the grass burning in a small clearing. We decide that we could probably even stamp it out. It just looks like a few lines burning in about a 10-foot radius. We get out, and one of my friends starts walking in a circle, following the burnt ash, and looks towards the middle. He then starts to climb a tree, and as he gets a few feet up, he says, "Guys, this is a pentagram." The weird thing is that it had been burning for at least half hour before we got there, but the grass was still burned into a perfect pentagram. No spreading at all. Super weird. A few days later, we hear about how there are people arrested a few years ago for performing devil worship in the river bottoms. They would regularly burn pentagrams into the ground and slaughter animals in the center. So over the next year, this story spreads through the town and it becomes this sort of legend. My brother has this mythology class in the spring, and the final project was to create a myth. The teacher, knowing this story, suggests to my brother that he uses this as his story and gives it some depth. Greek mythology integrated with real life. My brother give life to the name of Nephus Gowan, or Go for short, a story about a mortal cursed by Zeus for an affair with Hera, doomed to be a river demon for the rest of time. But the background story is not enough. He decided he needed evidence. We decided to start the night off the same way we did the first night. Bonfire with about 15 to 20 people, guitars, ghost stories, then gal stories. We called this the ritual, and it seemed to invite whatever it was. After a few hours, we decided it was time. We head towards the bottoms with a video camera in night mode and spot lights. Everyone has their own flashlight, BB guns, you name it. We get about halfway out and the dark feeling comes upon us. Again, I really have to stop and stress this feeling. Fear like you know something wants you dead. This time we don't hear the whistling, but we do hear a rush of something moving quickly and very close. We can't manage to get it in the lights or on the camera, so we decide that we have to keep going. We are still about 20 meters from the bottoms, and there is a small hill ridge that separates the fields from the river. The front person stops moving and asks for the spotlight. He shines it up on this ridge, and standing next to a tree is the black shape with glowing red eyes, 4 feet tall, looking like a child wearing a hooded trench coat but so black that it seems to be made from a black hole. It stays there and stares right back at us. It felt like it was there forever, all of us staring. "Does everyone see that?" with the cameraman saying, "Focus, damn it." Then it slowly takes 2 steps towards the tree and disappears behind it, and does not come out from the other side. Screw the project, screw everyone else. Panic sets in and everyone starts running towards the house. We get to the backyard where we have to cross a barbed wire fence. Our house does have a lot of outdoor lighting, so we figure once we cross the fence we'll be safe. The cameraman is on the field side, still pointed towards the bottoms when he realizes he's the last one on that side of the fence. Quick panic, and he turns to hop over. We all get inside, and after trying to calm down, we decide we need to see the footage. We watch everything, trying to see if we caught anything weird on the early part. Nothing. We get to the ridge and the camera just did not want to focus. It faces the ridge, super blurry. He pulls it down, looks at feet, and it would focus back up and blur again. You could hear, "It's going behind the tree." And then bam, focus as clear as day. Obviously extremely disappointed, everyone starts up their own conversations. My brother starts the tape over again from the beginning and sits right below the TV staring at it, no talking. He is pausing and rewinding frame by frame at the blurry part, trying to find something, but none of the footage seems usable. He gets to the part where we are almost back at the house and my friend, the one from the beginning stories, just happens to be watching, and at the end says, "Hold on, go back." They go real slow frame by frame again, as the cameraman hops the fence. As he hops, the camera faces slightly into the yard to the left, and standing next to a tree not 5 feet away is a small black figure with red glowing eyes. In the yard 5 feet away from him, less than 10 away from most of the rest of us. None of us saw it, or knew it was there, but we had it on camera. So back in those days we had these things called VHS tapes. You put movies on them, and my brother and his friends edited the movie and made 2 copies, one for us and one to turn into his teacher for the project. These tapes both included the footage we shot that night, as well as most of the story we have told here. A few years later, my brother and I decided we wanted to watch it, but couldn't find the tape anywhere. We searched the whole house, nothing. We did not want to fail, so we called up his mythology teacher who we knew had this tape, and had even shown it to his class and asked if we could borrow it to copy it. And of course, he also seemed to have misplaced his copy. To this day, I still don't go to the river bottoms. I don't like to bring up the story when people or family members ask me to tell it, because I know they'll think I'm either lying or that it was just youthful fear playing tricks on my mind. I know what I saw, and I know what I felt. It was real. And though I don't know what it was, something decided to come and torment me and my friends in our teenage years. And I'm 100% confident in saying that it wanted to see us dead. To set the scene, me and my buddy were driving along on a weekend, at night, with some girls we picked up. My buddy is driving, I'm in the passenger seat, and the girls are in the back. We were bored as hell, and somehow the topic of scary stuff popped up. Where we live, there is a certain road tucked away in the back of the woods that follows close to some train tracks. It's extremely dark and infamous for a plethora of spooky stuff. Mostly stories about ghosts, but also stories of people being raped, beaten, and murdered back on that road. So me and my buddy, being the brave, manly men we are, proposed we go there, and they agreed. So we arrived at the beginning of the road and slowly made our way through the dark and foggy road in the dead of night. We drove about 15 minutes until we reached the end of the road, which led to the start of a more populated road. We weren't impressed, so decided to go back through it, but this time do something a little different. So we circled back, driving through the road again, but about halfway through my buddy decided to turn the car off and the lights. We sat in silence for 10 minutes, hearing distant melodic sounds that seemed to be coming from all directions. The fog was thick, but we could still make out at least 15 feet in front of us. Me and my buddy are grinning ear to ear, because the girls are getting super antsy and scared, until we hear a boom. All the windows fog up immediately. We couldn't see anything anymore, like condensation on the glass. The girls start screaming, and me and my buddy were like, "Alright, let's get the hell out of here." He turns the car on and peels out, trying to make his way through the fog and smoked windows. Eventually we get to the end, but this time the exit was blocked by a fallen tree, which scared us at the time, but didn't think much of it. We turned around and got out of there. Fast forward 5 years and one of my co-workers was talking about the road. He ends up saying how one of his buddies, him and all of their girlfriends, were there four-wheeling. His buddy ended up going off alone into a wooded area only to return later without the quad and running for his life screaming Bloody Mary. They took no time to find out the situation and hauled ass to get out of there, only to find out the exit was blocked by a fallen tree. He looked it up. Turns out someone was killed back there after being trapped in by trees blocking the road. I never took the time to verify what he looked up. Maybe because I'm scared of what might have happened and if it were true, or maybe I don't want to find out it wasn't. And my buddy pulled a fast one on me. But I still won't forget my own experiences there. The road is particularly infamous, popular for ghost stories, and one infamous story is told that an albino lives somewhere off the road with glowing eyes and all. I've heard it's a cannibal, and he's friendly until he invites you out to his home for homemade moonshine. Either way, you probably don't want to find out. P.S. After some research, I've discovered that it takes place on Constitution Drive in Pennsylvania. There's a video I've seen where a woman claims to have caught the most famous ghost story Constitution has to offer, the man and his dog. The legend has it that the man was walking his dog one day when he was struck by a train severing one leg, leaving him fatally wounded and eventually bleeding out. There are claims that people see this man pacing up and down Constitution walking his dogs, whose eyes glow red. Constitution is a really, really weird place to be at night. Tons of stories, strange, demented and scary things are always told about that place. When you go there at night, you can hear strange noises, almost as if someone is whistling a tune to you. This happened about 5 years ago. I just remembered it today and realized I don't know how to explain it. I worked a swing shift. It was 11 p.m. to midnight when I got home. My dog was in the backyard. I went inside and took off my shoes right away, getting ready to take a shower. However, my dog started barking frantically. This was common for him to do, as he was protective. I would check, and there was actually a problem every time, just in case. I went out on deck into the backyard. He was barking at the bottom of the stairs facing away from me, which was unusual for him to do. I started talking, and he stopped barking immediately. Then I heard very loud and heavy breathing. I thought it was my dog panting, but he was not. The sound seemed to come from above me, and he was standing below me. It sounded like someone hyperventilating, like they were trying to breathe as loudly as possible. I could not see anything out of the ordinary, and decided to investigate. I went down the stairs and examined my yard and the next door neighbors, as this was a suburban area. When I got near, I heard the breathing. I suddenly heard the sound from a yard further away. Once I got to that yard, the sound jumped to the next. Being young and dumb, I continued down the street. Every time I got close, the sound would jump. It always sounded the same. It was the same loudness and pitch, always the same distance away. I continued down the road until I reached a bend. My feet hurt, so I stopped for a minute and realized that due to the curve I could not see the place where I heard the sound, but it seemed to be just within the edges of the wooded area. I was seriously considering chasing after it, when it occurred to me how foolish it would be to investigate alone like that, especially without shoes. My phone was dead, and I suddenly felt like I was prey to an animal or some kind of predator that was trying to lure me further away. I immediately turned and walked back as quickly as possible. It may have just been my anxiety from being alone in the dark, but I could not stop feeling that something terrible would have happened if I went further. I never heard the sound again, or had any weird experiences like that. I no longer live in that area. The best mundane answer I have is a bird of some kind. What is most creepy to me is I have since read stories of people following a noise and then had a feeling of something luring them into the woods. I know a lot of these stories might not be true or have simple explanations, but if anyone has any suggestions for what I heard, I'd love to hear them. This was in the Midwest United States. I work in a pub. It's about 2 miles away in the next village. I usually finish work quite late, 1 or 2 a.m., and have to cycle home. The only route is a small road that goes through somewhat large woods. There's a 1-mile stretch that has absolutely no streetlights. It's pitch black, and as I'm cycling through the woods, I start hearing this loud screeching sound, similar to a small dying animal. It scared the hell out of me, so I started pedaling fast. I continued to hear it, and it seemed as if it were progressing towards me. I used my phone's camera light to navigate, although it isn't impossible to see without it. I point my phone behind me, and I swear I caught sight of some humanoid creature on all fours running at me. Call it mind games, but this was pretty vivid. I continued to cycle as fast as I can, as I'd been cycling long distance from a young age. I'd like to say I'm reasonably fast, yet I continue to hear the screeching and the light patting of footsteps of whatever is chasing me. I try to turn my phone light off, and after a few seconds I manage to do so. The patting becomes quieter, and I hear one last screech from whatever it was, and I have never been so scared in all my life. A few days later, I was doing the same cycle back again. After cycling for a few minutes, I heard the same scream that I heard back then. I was terrified. The first time wasn't just some stupid coincidence. It sounded far away and didn't seem as though it was directed towards me. I kept my light off this time. I assumed whatever did it didn't see me, but I began to pump it home. This is when it gets bad. Throughout the forest in all directions, I heard what must have been at least 10 other screams, all sounding exactly the same in harmony. I honestly thought that was it. I was going to die at any second, but I very happily made it home, and I don't know what it is, but I know I never want to go back there again. For context, our woods have deer and foxes, no mountain lions nor boars. I know what they both sound like, as my house has a lot of woods surrounding it, and they sound like nothing I heard. I can still hear it ringing in my head. I'm so terrified and don't know what to do. This happened to my dad. A few years ago, he was working on this large ranch with his cousin for a very rich guy in Texas. He was going to work with 2 other people, ex-militaries, sergeants, both of them, tough guys who had their share at war. The 2 soldiers had been on the ranch longer than my dad and cousin. They knew the ins and outs. One day my dad asks about the forest, if they could go see it or camp someday. The sergeant says they can, but only during the day, as they're not spending the night there. My dad's now confused how 2 John Wicks are afraid of the dark. So the creepy thing is that the ranch has this night vision cameras in the forest that take pictures of movement and deers late at night. The soldiers found 2 pictures in the camera with 2 little girls, alone, next to a deer, way past midnight. Since then, they don't step into the forest late at night. They conclude that one of the girls was wearing a Navajo dress perhaps, in a place miles away from civilization and a caged property. I have the 2 pictures. I've seen them. It is one girl about 4, and alone in the woods, and the deer are around, and there's one that's a bit older, maybe 8, looking at a deer while another deer is looking directly at her. They're not that far away. The girls are practically pet distance from the deer. We were camping at Long Beach, Washington, for the Kite Festival, and decided to take a late-night drive. We found ourselves on some back roads in the woods, cruising along slowly, with no music on and the windows down. No other cars but us, and suddenly everything just felt wrong. It was dark, but the lights seemed different somehow. I remember the hair on the back of my neck standing up, and just having the thought, this isn't right. We shouldn't be here. I look over and my wife is wide-eyed, clearly feeling the same way. I decided to pull over so I could turn around and head back the way we came. Then we noticed deer coming out of the woods and standing on the sides of the road, and they were just staring at us. We realized the woods are oddly quiet, which just made things seem more strange. We look up and the branches are full of birds on both sides of the road. There must have been hundreds of them, all perched and alert. My wife said, "We need to go." So we left. Eventually, once we had gone far enough, everything seemed normal again. I'm a pretty big fan of the idea of multiple worlds and dimensions, and honestly wonder if we accidentally drove through a thin spot and briefly wound up somewhere we shouldn't have been. A buddy of mine had just bought a camera and liked playing around with the exposure open. Not sure about the terminology, but it's kind of a technique to make light look stretched and probably a billion other possibilities. So we took a few coloured plastic cups and went out to the part of the woods where we knew there was a trail we could walk down. It was close to midnight because we wanted it to be dark out to be able to see the effect of the light. Me and a friend held the cups over our heads and used a flashlight on our phones to light up the cups. I had a phone that I had to start to record to be able to use the flashlight, and so I did. The plan was to start at the top of the hill and walk down towards the camera to create a sort of string of light. People who know stuff about cameras, feel free to correct me. As we walked down the hill, me and my buddy started chatting quickly, and I noticed his eyes were wide open looking at me, as if a creature had emerged from behind me. I asked him what was wrong, getting really scared immediately, as well as getting quiet. He says in a high-pitched voice, "You don't hear that?" And then I heard it. The sound of children's laughter. Both of us panicked and started running down the hill, and we got to our friend with the camera way too early and he says, "What the hell are you doing? You have to walk down slowly or you'll ruin the shot." We told him that we heard kids laughing in the woods, and he didn't believe us. Naturally, I realized I had the camera running, so maybe I caught something and played it back. The microphone picked it up perfectly. 2 or 3 kids around 6 or so in the middle of the woods. No house or guardian or light in sight. Needless to say, we noped out of there shortly after. On our days off, after high school, my cousin and I would routinely drive my parents' golf cart around the neighborhood and into the back of the large neighborhood because it was abandoned and completely overgrown. We knew all abandoned construction trails through the forest and where they met back up to the roads that were completely unbothered by any suburban houses. It was broad daylight, probably around 2 or 3 p.m., and we had parked the golf cart coming off the trail and towards the concrete roads into the back part of the neighborhood. The grass on the unused lots was covered in weeds and grass that was probably 5 or 6 feet off the ground. We unleashed the pipe. We take a few hits, all is peaceful, the birds are singing, the air is clean, and he takes another hit and passes it to me. I start to light the bowl, and before I take a hit, I hear my cousin say my name twice, very seriously. I panic and think the cops have just pulled up or something, and I look at him, and he's staring straight ahead, shocked, and just says in a low voice, "What the hell is that, cuz?" I look up and down the road and see it. A little man peering out from the grass on the left side of the road about 20 feet away. It looks like he is a naked humanoid completely covered in mud and crouched down as low as a person can go while still being mobile. It's not human, but it is human-shaped. With both of us staring at this creature, he backs up slightly, and then it disturbs me to remember this. Rhodey runs faster than humanly possible across the concrete road and into the grass on the other side. It was like a human, moving as fast as an insect does when it panics. Imagine crouching down as far as you can without falling over, and then sprinting. The thing appears to do just that. No words needed. I disengage the parking brake and gas it, We drive all the way to the front of the neighborhood to the community center area probably a mile away and decide we should probably just go home. Lots of frustrated swearing followed because there was no rational explanation for it. We still talk about the story all the time. Funnily enough, about a year ago my parents moved to a bigger house about 100 feet from where this happened, once the neighborhood started building back there again. The second story must have been about 6 or 7 years ago, maybe a year or two after the first. Very general timeline, but you get the idea. I was hanging out with a friend and his girlfriend, as well as his weed dealer, which is a guy I had kind of grown knowing for a while. I had stopped smoking by then, but everyone was good company, and I would have a few beers with them while they did their thing. After a while it became apparent that we would have to give the dealer a ride back, and we decided we would just go all together and could take my car. So we did. It must have been about 9 or 10 in the evening. The dealer's house is a straight shot down the main road for about 15 minutes. We get onto the main road through the city, and everything is completely normal for a while. We're almost to the neighborhood, and suddenly, police, lights, we get pulled over into a well-lit gas station right into the middle of the whole routine, and it unfolds. The officer accuses me of pulling out in front of someone while trying to make a right turn, despite us having all green lights and riding in the middle of 3 lanes. His reason for pulling us over was so incomprehensible, but he ends up recognizing the guy in the front seat, the dealer, who unfortunately didn't have anything on him. So cut waiting around, and 3 more cop cars show up and the drug-sniffing dogs. Of course, the dogs hits off on nothing, and we get the whole kit and caboodle of stepping out while they were searching the car. Here's when the fun starts, because they begin pulling out a lot of my occult stuff, like an athame and wooden chest full of sigils and candles and some other mobile all-purpose stuff. What are you guys, some kind of devil worshippers? I roll my eyes and open the trunk for them. Nothing there but a black robe and a Ouija board that I've used for years. Of course, they take both out and wave it around and make fun of it some more. The encounter ends without any great dramatization because they expectedly found nothing. I loathed that they had tossed around all my tools, but I'm a pretty level-headed practitioner. We drive the dealer to his house and part ways and head back to my friend's house to mess around and have beers. I head home around 2 or 3 and go to bed. Let me forewarn you that I have never had sleep paralysis or apnea. I don't dream particularly or that often or spectacularly, and I can't recall a single instance of experiencing a hallucination in my life. So when I see things, I know there's more to it. I don't wake up. I'm still asleep. I feel like my spirit is brought to the surface of a deep water. I open my eyes but still can't see. And there is a really weird noise, a rhythmic whooshing that is bringing me to wakefulness. My vision slowly expands outwards from the center of a blue tinge, very unusual, and I immediately become aware of the fact that I'm not alone, and I look into the room that expands out from the foot of my bed. It glows blue because of the moonlight coming in from the windows at the opposite end. A few feet out from the foot of my bed is a high-top round table with 2 high-top stools on either side. I can hardly see it, because there, a perfectly silhouetted goat-man-looking being, perhaps even 7 feet tall, sitting on the high-top stool closest to me is facing my direction, with moose-like horns, and the source of the whooshing is his breath, as if he'd just run very hard. I can't see his features, but he's obviously looking right at me, and I'm looking at him. I blink. I'm experiencing sleep paralysis, I think. I blink more, and I become very afraid that there really is a 7-foot-tall goat man sitting in my bedroom, as this is not a usual predicament that I have to face. I probably stare for about 10 seconds before I get hit with the sort of communicated feeling that the being has just come from doing something very awful to some people, one person in particular, and then rushed here to alert me to it. The breathing slows a little after another 10 seconds, and the being moves to get off the stool, the table behind him shifting, and creaks as it does so. As soon as he hits the ground, he just fades out, I'm baffled, afraid, and relieved. I get up, turn the lights on, walk around the house, and everything is effectively normal. I sit and think about the whole thing, and the police incident didn't even connect in my head for 5 or 10 minutes. I go out for a smoke to observe the lake out back, and the sky because the moon was bright and beautiful. It might have been a full moon, but I can't really remember. I calm down, go back to bed, having been relieved by the connection of the events that I had made. I don't remember what time this happened because I never looked, but it seemed like the middle of the night. I never had any further happenings in the vein of this experience or seeing anything in the night, and I've never seen the being again. The last story wasn't super long after the Guardian of the Ouija board, probably less than a year. I worked at a movie theatre during this whole time period, and I had taken to jogging at around 2 or 3 a.m. after work, perfectly serene and safe. There was never anybody awake or driving around the house, and it was on a small triangle-shaped configuration of roads situated around the lake, with one road going through the forest to get back to the main neighborhood. That road was on the other side of the lake from where I was. I come out of the garage and start walking down the road, and shortly come up to the first turn. The orange of the street lamps keeps the roads pretty decently lit, but the orange lamps cast a spooky feeling. As I round the corner on the sidewalk, I see another jogger down the other way on the other side of the road. I think about how odd it is to see another jogger at this time of night, so I slow down and kind of stare. It occurs very quickly that he is not another jogger, because most joggers are not 8-foot tall, ghostly shadow beings taking 6 footsteps. Due to the confusion, I don't even feel anything as I watch this tall, lanky shadow being run all the way down the road right in front of me, and in between 2 houses and into the woods. He made absolutely no sound at all as he passed right in front of me, down the middle of the road. I saw where his hands and feet should have been. There was nothing but a fade to mist. After seeing that, and taking a moment to process, I decided if an interdimensional shadow being was running at full sprint away from something, then I probably should be too. So I turned around and noped out of there back to my garage to sit in existential terror. After 30 minutes, I decided that I was going to conquer my fear and run around the triangle like I intended, before having a paranormal incident. I succeeded, terrified, and fortunately nothing happened on that attempt. Anyway, these are the stories from my parents' neighborhood. I'm not sure if the sightings have any relation to the forest, but I have a strong feeling that they do in some way. I'm an occultist, sure, but stories of this nature are far from different in substance than seeing unexplained beings unprovoked. Thank you for listening. Hey guys, it's Mort here. Thank you so much for listening. I'm sorry this video came out late. Some delays in the production. Don't forget that there will be a new short video released tomorrow. Be sure to check it out if you like the shorts. I think that's something fun and a little bit different. Huge thank you as always to my members and patrons. You guys mean the world to me, so thank you so much. I had a wonderful birthday. Thank you to everyone who showed up at my live stream. It really means a lot. There were lots of fun surprises, and today we just finished off with a few extra bits. Tail end of the birthday. But yes, tomorrow I've got to go to the bank because it turns out that someone has cloned my card and they've stolen lots of money. I wish I were lying, by the way. But yeah, it sucks. Don't worry about it though. I'm sure the bank will give it back. But to find out yesterday on my actual birthday that it happened was a real pain. But I'm pretty sure the bank will be able to help me recover it. I just hope they catch the person who's doing it. It's like £200 to PayPal, £150 to a hotel one day, £150 to a hotel another. And it's like, I hadn't even noticed because I don't really check my app, but they called me out the blue yesterday right as I was about to cut my birthday cake. What do you know? All right then guys, I'm going to leave it here. I'll update you on Friday how tomorrow goes, if you're interested. Probably at the end of the video. But for now, stay awesome, and I'll see you in the next one.